Switch our attention to football, and in particular the UEFA Super League. Now, news breaking late last night that UEFA temporarily, and I think it's important to say that, have dropped its legal action against Real Madrid, Barcelona and Juventus for their continued push for a European Super League, with the trio still very much committed, whilst the fines handed out to the other 9 clubs have also been withdrawn. Alex Crook, you've been covering this for talkSPORT and been over this story for the last, 4 or 5 months, really. What is the latest? Bring us up to speed.
Does this mean I've been reinstated as European
you
Super
have,
League
mate.
correspondent?
You're in. Well done. You're in. Well done.
At least until the appeal. But you're right, Addy. I think the key is to stress that this is, in UEFA's mind, a temporary suspension of the fines dished out to the 9 clubs that have already withdrawn from the Super League. Of course, Real Madrid, Barcelona and Juventus at the moment are refusing to do so. There was a court action in Spain that resulted in UEFA having to drop the disciplinary charges after basically they were ruled to be illegal. But that legal action is being taken to the European Court of Justice next month, with both UEFA and those rebel clubs claiming they're confident of victory. I've got a statement from UEFA. They're asking for the removal of the judge Manuel Ruiz de Lara from the case, as well as filing papers with the Higher Court of Appeal in Madrid. And they say UEFA has filed a motion for the recusal of the judge presiding over the current proceedings, as it believes there are significant irregularities in these proceedings. In line with Spanish law and in the fundamental interest of justice, UEFA fully expects the judge in question to immediately stand aside pending the full and proper consideration of the motion. Further, UEFA shall be making a formal appeal to a higher court, the Provincial Court of Madrid, brackets Court of Appeal. So we haven't heard the end of this. I know Simon's got some very strong views that he's already expressed on social media. I'm sure we'll back up in a moment. But for me, I think this is a fight that UEFA possibly can't win. And
you can remove the possibly from it. They can't win.
And I felt it at the time when people were jumping up and down and calling for sanctions. They were calling for the Premier League to sanction these clubs. But actually, if you break it down, they came up with a proposal. They tried to force through this proposal. It didn't happen, more because of the fans than UEFA. But I don't think they've actually broken any laws yet, because they haven't taken part in the Super League. They've said they want to, but saying they want to do something and actually seeing it through are 2 very different things.
Yeah, I mean, they are basically being held responsible or accountable for what they actually are, UEFA. They are a cartel. They are a monopoly. They are the very thing that they're accusing.
Cartel's strong.
Well, I think it's probably about right. They are a monopoly that determines how you play in European football, what European football looks like, how the distribution works. They are a law unto themselves, as are FIFA. They're little fiefdoms run by people that have agendas that are necessarily not for the well-being of football. All these people that ran around listening to the claptrap that Gary Neville came out with about mobilising forces and the fans. The reasons why... Alex is right in one respect and not another. UEFA and FIFA put the fear of God into football by suggesting they'll take the players out of commission and suggesting the players can't play for their countries, and they'll do everything they possibly can to put downward pressure on these clubs to acquiesce. They didn't have a fight. They didn't even get off their stool. It's like Anthony Joshua coming out in the first round, then going and sitting down before he's thrown a punch. That was the level of competition that the 12 clubs put up. The idea that they won't get overturned or they won't get the situation from UEFA overturned was for the birds. They categorically would. And the reasons why they're making this background noise about judges asking them to recuse themselves. I've lived in Spain for 20 years. I know what a despicable legal system it is at times. So there will be grounds for people to be able to look at the Spanish legal system saying it's flawed. But this is being pushed back into the long grass, because what's coming over the hill is exactly what UEFA don't want, which is the disempowerment and the dismantlement of their authority, and also a rekindling, a reigniting of the agenda, which will come back over the hill absolutely unequivocally.
So if
these clubs
no
are going to form an ESL,
then,
but the mechanism, the method
so you still believe they're going to form a European Super League?
Dollars for donuts. But the method of delivery, they've already got a European Super League. It's called the Champions League. And by the way, UEFA have got the audacity to criticise the ESL while looking for a coefficient to put legacy clubs into the Champions League. You haven't got to qualify. You've got a legacy.
Yeah.
Isn't that the same thing in a different guise?
And that was almost lost,
populist,
wasn't it? Because this Super League proposal came to the fore just as those proposals were being forced through by UEFA. They almost got away with that because nobody was paying any attention.
And Simon, but the Champions League doesn't kill the pyramid in this country, does it? It doesn't.
No, the Premier League's achieved that.
But the Super League doesn't have to do that either. And I think Simon agrees with me on this.
Absolutely right.
Promotion and relegation. If they bring that in, I'm not necessarily against the idea of forming some kind of European Super League. What you can't have is a closed shop.
And if you then utilise the revenues that the founder members, because you've got to remember this, whether you like it or you don't like it, the 12 clubs that are part of that would be the intellectual capital that drives the broadcasters. Nobody wants to go and see the Champions League because Zenit's at Peterburgers are in it. They want to see it because Liverpool, Juventus, Manchester United, Barcelona, Real Madrid in it. They're the intellectual values that the broadcasters want to see. So that's have to be reflected in the commercial distributions. If you then get an ESL which has meritocracy attached to it with an obligation to kick back to the domestic leagues, and the domestic leagues have an obligation to kick down the pyramid, all of a sudden you start to restructure the finances in football for the betterment of everybody rather than just 6 or 7 football clubs. This argument we're going to have independent regulation in this country is laughable because independent regulation isn't giving booze to the fans on a Saturday afternoon and taking away the watershed. It's about redistributing the finances, and that's the one thing they won't be able to achieve. So this, for me, is almost along the lines of there may be trouble ahead. There is trouble ahead because the reasons why these 3 clubs didn't remove themselves from it because they knew what they were going to achieve. UEFA pulling back now. What they're going to ask to do, they're going to ask for protectionism. They're going to ask the individual leagues to mandate their clubs, the covenants that suggest that these clubs can't step out of their individual leagues, otherwise they're going to be consequenced. You saw it last week in the charter that the Premier League was putting in front of the owners to suggest how they should operate. They ain't going to sign it, but it's going to look like good noise for the media.
Simon, what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you don't feel there should be any consequences whatsoever for these, let's call them the dirty dozen, for what they try to do? None. No fines, which clearly have been withdrawn. I think, nothing.
Do you, the best laid plans of mice and men, do you sanction people for thoughts? Do you sanction people for ideas? The Premier League then should be in the dock 29 years ago, as the architects of the downfall of English football, because they knew they had a bunch of incompetent clowns running the Football League and they took advantage of them.
Was it a fault, though? Was it a fault, or was it more than that? It was like they were going to go ahead and do it if it wasn't for fans marching on clubs.
What you do is, in a business deal, and this is probably a little bit of a euphemism, if you've got an opposition in front of you, to coin an expression, you give them a punch. If they breathe in, you've got to fight in your hands. If they fall over, you roll over them. So they put out the worst case scenario. This is what we're going to do. We're going to take everything away from you, give you nothing back. And then someone says, oh, hold on you, we're not having that. Right? This is how you're going to operate. All right, then we'll fine tune it. We'll make it meritocracy. We'll make the 12 founder clubs have individual shares in the business so they can keep their interest in because it's all about money. And by the way, we're losing the central reason why this needs to be done. The reasons why this needs to be done is because nobody can get hold of player salaries. Nobody can stop PSG, nobody can stop Man City, nobody can stop the big clubs that have got inordinate amounts of money from the amount of money they're prepared to pay players, the amount of money that players are prepared to ask for or demand, and nobody will stop it. And the only way to stop it and to make these football clubs sustainable is to increase the revenues. Now, if you take away the need for the revenues to be increased, then maybe you take away some of the appetite to do it. Of course, you've got the Americans in place that don't like relegation, so we know that part of the thinking behind the lack of relegation is the American franchise model. But this is a major situation that's going to manifest itself in football. I was thinking this morning, I wondered if there was any opportunity for the EFL to use this kind of thinking to undermine the monopoly that is English football, which is 91% of TV money going to 20 clubs in the Premier League. It may fall on fallow ground because 50 clubs have played in the Premier League and it's not anti-competition. But this is a big moment, and Juventus and Barcelona and Madrid, whether you like it or you don't, they got balls, not like the other 9 clubs that ran away the moment they got a bit of adversity. Whether you like it or not, the only thing wrong with this was meritocracy. Get the meritocracy back in ground. Why should UEFA have it? Why should UEFA determine what European football looks like? Are they good guys? No, they're not. They're loading more and more competitions. Champions League, Europa Conference League, Europa League. What are they going to do next?
And you were talking about the need for clubs to generate more revenue there, and this brings back into focus the idea that you've been banging on about for a while on this programme about maybe a sort of Netflix-style
owning its own content
product where the Premier League basically own their own television rights. I hate that idea for one reason, because I think it takes away the critical element of the way that sport is covered in this country. It almost becomes club propaganda, and I don't think that's a healthy situation for us to get ourselves into.
I think that's a very good point. The only reason I make the Netflix of football model is because economically it dwarfs the current model and it brings into revenue. At this moment in time, the Premier League is like a movie of the week. It's got a small amount of money than the Iron Man franchise. Monetize it properly, you get a control over your own destiny rather than give it to Sky. Why are you giving the money to Sky for?
talkSPORT Breakfast with Laura Woods. Monday to Wednesday mornings 6 till 10. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.